You ever been faked out before? Like you're driving down the road and you see like a dog that looks like it's gonna be really, really cute, and then you get up close to it and you're like, oh gosh, that's the ugliest dog I've ever seen. It's kind of what this report looked like. Like this report was looking at how protein intake has changed since 1970. So in this case, it was looking at from like 1970 to 2014. And at first it looked great because we're probably all protein fans here. Like most of the literature really does suggest that. And when I had like Peter Attia and Dr. Gabrielle Lyon and all the common theme is like protein matters. Even some of the big vegan advocates are still saying, hey, protein matters, right? So let's break down this study for a second. It was a report that was put out by the USDA. So in 1970, the protein intake was about 6.7 ounces equivalent. So essentially that meant that on average, people were eating about 6.7 ounces of protein per day. Like they would put it into an ounce equivalent to say that it could be meat, it could be, whatever, some vegetables, some nuts, this and that. 2014 went up to 7.1 ounce equivalents. That's great. That tells us that we're actually increasing our protein intake. But in this same study, the same report, they analyzed the protein quality. And this is where nuance is very important when you're talking about nutrition. Because if you look at a food label, it's just going to say protein. Like if I were to look at a jar of almond butter, it's going to tell me that it has a nice amount of protein, and lo and behold, they're going to put on that label that it's a high protein food. And it's not a low protein food, but it's also not a complete protein. Remember, we need all those essential amino acids. That's why so many vegans will combine different foods to create a complete protein. And although it sounds like first grade to people that know nutrition, unfortunately, 95% of people probably do not know this. Those are the people that really need to hear it the most, right? So what we've seen in this literature is that based on this report, red meat consumption went down 29%. Okay, egg consumption went down significantly. Dairy consumption went down significantly. Chicken consumption actually went up quite a bit. Now, this makes sense because there's been quite a bit of demonization towards the red meat crowd. So I think people didn't want to give up meat and they went to chicken, they went to poultry, right? I don't really have a problem with poultry at all. I eat a ton of it. I don't even eat all that much red meat, but I do eat enough red meat because I eat it for nutrition, not necessarily for protein. I could get my protein from a whey protein shake. I could get my protein from a chicken breast, from a jar of tuna, whatever. What I eat red meat for is the nutrient profile. I literally use red meat as like a supplement. Just like that. Like I could get my protein anywhere, like I said, but I use it because I want the nutrition from it. But I also want the taste. Red meat is a treat that is not exactly a guilty pleasure, but something that I can thoroughly enjoy. I put a link down below for the steaks that I use. ButcherBox has been a sponsor on this channel for well over half a decade. So you supporting them also supports this channel, which is awesome. But at the end of the day, you're in it for you, and I get it. And their steaks are probably the best tasting steaks that you're gonna have, at least in my opinion. They're grass-fed steaks, grass-finished steaks. So these are tremendous tasting. Their ribeyes are unreal, but I'm more of a lean steak guy. So I go for their fillets. I go for some of their New Yorks, which are actually pretty lean. Anyway, a wide variety of them, and they're delivered right to your doorstep. And you will find that a lot of times it ends up being less expensive ordering from ButcherBox than it is going to the grocery store and buying them, not even factoring in the cost of money to drive to the grocery store. So a big thank you to ButcherBox. I highly, highly, highly recommend you check them out if you like red meat and you want to elevate your experience with it. So that link is in the top line of the description underneath this video. What was most interesting is that there was a 136% increase in protein intake from nuts. Now I want to point something out. I don't have a problem with nuts, right? Like I eat a fair bit of them, but when you use them as a protein source, I want you to think about something. How many calories are in just like a handful of nuts? Off the top of your head. Maybe, I don't know, a couple hundred, a few hundred in a big handful, maybe 400 or 500. How many grams of protein do you think you're gonna get? Maybe 15 to 20 if you're lucky. But what we're dealing with here is a poor protein to calorie ratio, but probably even more important than that is we're talking incomplete proteins. So what has happened is by demonizing and sort of smearing red meat, people have said, well, okay, I get it, protein's important, so let me go ahead and eat these high protein foods. What's happening is people are going into the grocery stores, and food marketing has gotten so good at swaying our opinion, our ability to buy something just on a whim, because they could put high protein on the label, and there's no ramification for saying that it's a complete protein or an incomplete protein. So I could come out with an almond butter that has a bunch of high fructose corn syrup in it, has a bunch of additives in it, but I could put it on the shelf and say, hey guys, this is high protein because it has a bunch of protein from almonds in it. And I'm gonna meet my protein requirements on paper, but my body is still left hanging because it's not getting the essential aminos that it needs to actually build and repair and synthesize what it needs to synthesize. So it becomes very problematic. So on the surface, the US Department of Agriculture says, we're doing a good job. We're increasing that protein intake. But we're not. We're decreasing the most important pieces. Now, in this same report, we've seen other things too. We also see that fruit intake has increased. But you know what else is really interesting? Fruit intake increased, but fruit juice intake increased 35%, right? The devil is in the details. And that is exactly the problem when you just look at macronutrients. Like looking at these things just like how we're looking at it now illuminates why it's exactly the same issue we face if we're just trying to segment proteins, fats, and carbs, or just segment calories. Calories are probably the most important equation for the mainstream to understand. But it's also probably the most difficult thing for them to really adhere to and grasp overall. Because we can all know that like, hey, if you spend more money than you earn, you're gonna go broke. And if you make more money than you spend, you're gonna make money. Then why isn't everyone a billionaire? It's that easy, right? Well, why isn't everyone walking around with a six-pack, right? It's the same concept. It's easier said than done. So we have to look at the little details here. Protein is the most important thing that you could possibly consume. And with this, we are completely missing the point here. So my suggestion to you would be make a concerted effort to start your day off with as much protein as you can so that you get that allocation in early on. A, it'll make it so you're not hungry a majority of the day. B, you're getting your protein requirement out of the way, so you're not thinking about it. Not that you need to be consciously thinking about it and obsessing with it, but it is arguably the most important thing for you. So along with that, you're also having things that are delicious. You could have steak and eggs. You could have protein yogurt, like make some Greek yogurt with protein powder in it. However you want to go about it, go about it. But getting that protein first thing in the morning is more so psychologically beneficial than anything else, because it's all going to carry on throughout the rest of the day so that you're not choosing that almond butter that's a high protein food. As always, keep it locked in here on my channel. I'll see you tomorrow.